I grew up with a stutter that followed me like a shadow. Words would catch in my throat, refusing to come out smoothly. When I met Amanda at speech therapy where she accompanied her young nephew, I thought I had found someone who saw beyond my broken sentences. Her smile seemed genuine when I stumbled over words, her patience endless. 3 years later, I stood at our wedding altar, managing to say my vows almost perfectly. But last Christmas, as we sat at her parents' table, everything changed. She mocked my stutter brutally, her family laughing along. Before I tell you how I found my voice again, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that subscribe button if you have ever felt silenced, because this story is about finding strength when those closest to us try to break us down. My first memories of stuttering trace back to 2nd grade. Mrs. Walters asked me to read aloud, and the words jammed in my throat like rocks. 20 pairs of eyes locked onto me as I struggled through each syllable. Tommy Miller in the back row started mimicking me, and soon half the class joined in. That day marked the beginning of a pattern that would follow me for years. My parents noticed my struggle early on. Mom, a kindergarten teacher with infinite patience, would sit with me for hours practicing slow, deliberate speech. Dad, less verbal, but equally supportive, showed his love by driving me to speech therapy twice weekly, without complaint, even when it meant missing his beloved baseball games. Dr. Freeman became my first speech therapist when I was 8 years old. His office smelled like peppermint and old books. He taught me techniques. Breathe from the diaphragm. Tap your finger with each syllable. Slow down your thoughts. Some helped, others did not, but the stutter remained a constant companion. School became a battleground. I developed strategies to survive, volunteering answers only when I knew I could speak the words smoothly, substituting difficult consonants with easier ones, or sometimes just staying silent. Lunch periods were spent alone with books, rather than navigating the treacherous waters of casual conversation. The library became my sanctuary. The librarian, Mrs. Donovan, my unwitting ally. By high school, I had accepted my stutter as part of my identity. I joined the computer club where talking was minimal and coding skills paramount. My fingers could express on keyboards what my mouth could not in conversation. This discovery led me toward computer science in college, where I found my professional calling. Northeastern University brought unexpected growth. Professor Jenkins in my sophomore year pulled me aside after I had skipped an oral presentation. Instead of excusing me, he challenged me. Your ideas are too valuable to keep locked in your head because of fear. He worked with me after hours, and though my presentations were never smooth, they were heard. This small victory changed something fundamental in how I viewed myself. I was 28 when I met Amanda. I had gone back to speech therapy after a particularly humiliating client presentation at work. The therapist, Dr. Lillian Carter, ran a group session I attended on Thursday evenings. Amanda was there with her 7-year-old nephew Tyler, who had developed a stutter after his parents' divorce. She sat quietly in the corner, her blonde hair catching the fluorescent light, her eyes attentive as her nephew worked through exercises. Our first interaction came when we both reached for coffee in the waiting room. I spilled mine on her white blouse and stuttered through an apology so badly, I nearly walked out in shame. Instead of annoyance, she laughed warmly. Do not worry about it. Now, I have a reason to buy that new top I have been eyeing. Her ease made my words flow more naturally. We exchanged numbers that day. Our first date was at a quiet bookstore cafe where the pressure to speak was minimal. She asked questions but gave me time to answer, never finishing my sentences or showing impatience. When I told her about my work as a software engineer, she seemed genuinely interested, asking insightful questions about projects I mentioned. What amazed me most was how she seemed to look straight through my stutter to hear what I was actually saying. Most people got caught on the delivery, their attention snagged on each repetition or block. Amanda appeared to simply receive my words as they eventually came her focus on the content rather than the container. Our relationship progressed quickly. Within 6 months, we were discussing marriage. My parents were cautiously supportive, happy for my happiness, but concerned about the speed. You seem different with her, Dominic, Mom observed. More confident. She was right. Amanda had a way of making me feel heard without struggle. The proposal happened at Walden Pond, where we had spent many peaceful Sundays. I had practiced the question for weeks, with Dr. Carter determined to ask without stumbling. When the moment came, the words flowed imperfectly, but sincerely. Her yes was immediate, her embrace tight enough to squeeze out any doubts. Our wedding day remains one of my proudest speech accomplishments. I worked for months with my therapist on those vows, practicing breathing techniques and visualization exercises. When I spoke them at the altar looking into Amanda's eyes, I stuttered only twice, minor hiccups in an otherwise smooth declaration of love. The victory felt symbolic, as if my improving speech reflected our bright future together. The first year of our marriage seemed to confirm all my hopes. We bought a small house in the suburbs of Boston, adopting a rescue dog we named Einstein. I advanced at work, moving into a senior development role that still limited client interaction while recognizing my technical abilities. Amanda found success too, being promoted to marketing director at her firm. When she finished my sentences during this period, it felt like a dance we were performing together. Her words a supportive extension of my thoughts, rather than an interruption. "We just think so much alike," she would say, and I believed her. Now I recognize it as the first subtle sign of what would come later, her growing impatience with my speech. The first Thanksgiving with her family should have been my warning. Her parents, Harold and Patricia, lived in a sprawling colonial in Winchester. Old money, evident in the casual display of antiques and original artwork. Harold, a financial advisor with steel gray hair and matching personality, watched me with barely concealed assessment. Patricia, thin and elegant, maintained a polite facade that never quite reached her eyes. During dinner, when I struggled to answer Harold's question about market projections, Amanda jumped in smoothly. "Dominic thinks the tech sector will stabilize by Q2, she said, squeezing my hand under the table. I felt grateful, then misreading her intervention as protection rather than embarrassment. When Harold raised an eyebrow at my stutter later, Amanda defended me. "Dad Dominic is brilliant with computers. His clients respect him tremendously." I drove home from that Thanksgiving feeling like I had passed some test, unaware that I had actually glimpsed the first threads of what would become a tightly woven betrayal. The changes in Amanda were so gradual I almost missed them. 6 months into our marriage, minor irritations began to appear when I stuttered in public. If we were at dinner with friends and I struggled to order, her smile would tighten almost imperceptibly. She began answering for me more frequently, her tone shifting from helpful to slightly condescending. At home, she would sometimes sigh when I took too long to make a point, checking her phone or suddenly remembering household tasks that needed attention. "Just text me what you want to say," she said once after I struggled to tell her about a work accomplishment. The hurt must have shown on my face because she quickly added, "I just hate seeing you struggle, babe." Invitations to spend time with her family increased, but strangely, she often suggested I stay home. "Dad is in one of his moods," or "Mom just wants girl time," became common explanations. When I did accompany her, the visits grew increasingly uncomfortable. Harold would ask me complex questions about technology or finance areas where I had expertise but difficulty expressing it fluently. His eyes would narrow at each block in my speech, his fingers drumming impatiently on whatever surface was nearest. Amanda spent more time on phone calls with her sister Bethany, conversations that would abruptly end when I entered the room. Once I overheard her say, "It just gets exhausting sometimes, you know," having to wait for every sentence. The casual cruelty of the comment froze me in place. When confronted, she denied it, referred to me. We were talking about Tyler's new teacher, she claimed, though her nephew had largely overcome his stutter years earlier. Work became both my refuge and a new source of anxiety. 9 months into our marriage, I was offered a promotion to lead developer, a role that came with significant benefits, but also required regular team presentations and client meetings. My immediate instinct was to decline, but my manager Jackson believed in me. "Your technical skills are unmatched, Dominic. We can work around the communication challenges." I accepted the position without discussing it with Amanda first, perhaps subconsciously knowing her reaction would not be supportive. When I told her that evening, her response confirmed my suspicions. "Are you sure that is wise? The stress might make your stutter worse." When I explained the salary increase and Jackson's confidence in me, she softened slightly but added, "Well, I hope they do not expect too much speaking from you. The comment stung, but it also sparked something rebellious in me. I began staying late at the office, practicing presentations in empty conference rooms. I recorded myself speaking and forced myself to listen to the playback, noting where I tensed up before difficult sounds. I found an online speech therapist who specialized in professional communications and scheduled weekly virtual sessions. Amanda noticed my late nights but attributed them to the new position rather than my determined self-improvement efforts. "Your job is clearly taking advantage of you," she complained when I missed dinner for the third time in a week. She seemed almost disappointed when I successfully delivered my first major client presentation, offering a perfunctory "that is nice" when I excitedly told her about the positive feedback I had received. Her brother Jake visited from Chicago that fall, staying with us for a week that revealed more about the family dynamics that had shaped Amanda. Jake shared his sister's physical attractiveness but none of her initial warmth. He made no effort to hide his impatience with my speech, openly mocking my stutter within hours of arriving. "Jesus Christ, man, spit it out," he said, when I struggled to ask about his flight. What shocked me more than his cruelty was Amanda's reaction. She laughed. Not the uncomfortable laugh of someone trying to diffuse tension, but the genuine amusement of shared mockery. When I confronted her after he left, she dismissed my concerns. "Jake teases everyone. It is how our family shows affection." This explanation rang hollow, especially when I recalled how their father treated service staff and colleagues with the same casual disdain. As Christmas approached, my anxiety about spending the holiday with her family intensified. Amanda had been increasingly critical and distant, spending more weekends at her parents' without me. Our conversations grew shorter, her impatience more evident. When she did engage, it often involved criticism of my clothing choices, my cooking, my habit of leaving coffee mugs in my home office. The vibrant woman who had once seen through my stutter to the person beneath seemed to have vanished. 3 days before Christmas, I overheard a phone conversation between Amanda and Bethany that confirmed my worst fears. I had come home early, a rare December snowstorm prompting my office to close at noon. Amanda was in our bedroom door ajar, her voice carrying clearly. "I just do not know if I can do this much longer, Beth. The stuttering is getting worse, not better. Sometimes I feel like I married half a person." I stood frozen in the hallway, her words cutting deeper than any schoolyard taunt ever had. Bethany must have offered some response because Amanda continued. "Mom thinks I should have focused on his earning potential, not his conversational skills. Dad says I should have him speak as little as possible at dinner." That night I attempted to address what I had heard. "Amanda, is everything okay between us? You seem unhappy." My delivery was surprisingly smooth, perhaps fueled by adrenaline and hurt. She looked startled, then defensive. "What are you talking about? Everything is fine. You are imagining problems because you are stressed about Christmas." Her dismissal was so absolute, so practiced, that I momentarily doubted my own experience, a feeling I would later recognize as the result of months of subtle gaslighting. Despite the growing tension, I had spent weeks selecting thoughtful gifts for her family. For Harold, a rare first edition of his favorite economist's memoir. For Patricia, handcrafted earrings from an artisan she had mentioned admiring. For Bethany, concert tickets to her favorite band. For Amanda, I had commissioned a painting of the Boston Harbor, where we had spent our first anniversary. Each gift represented hours of consideration, my attempt to build bridges with people who seemed determined to see only my flaws. The day before Christmas, Amanda suggested I drive separately to her parents' house. "I need to go early to help Mom with preparations," she explained. "You can come later before dinner." The arrangement struck me as odd, but also provided temporary relief from prolonged interaction with her family. I agreed, unaware that I was being set up for one of the most humiliating experiences of my adult life. The imposing colonial looked festive as I pulled into the circular driveway on Christmas Eve, red and green lights outlining the roof and windows. Fresh snow covered the manicured lawn, and a massive wreath adorned the front door. I sat in my car for several minutes, rehearsing greetings and breathing deeply to prepare for the evening ahead. Patricia answered the door with a glass of wine already in hand. "Dominic, you finally made it," she said, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Everyone is in the living room. Amanda was beginning to think you might not show." The subtle accusation in her tone was clear, though I had arrived exactly at the agreed-upon time. The living room was a showcase of holiday extravagance. A 12-foot Douglas fir dominated one corner, draped in what appeared to be antique ornaments and real silver tinsel. A fire crackled in the massive stone hearth, above which hung oil portraits of Harold and Patricia in their younger years. Harold stood by the drinks cart, while Amanda and Bethany sat close together on a leather sofa, whispering and giggling. "There he is," Harold announced, his voice booming across the room. "We thought you might have gotten lost in all 2 miles from the hotel." Amanda had insisted I stay at a nearby hotel rather than in their guest room, another detail that should have warned me of what was coming. I carried my carefully wrapped packages to the tree, placing them among the other gifts. Amanda barely acknowledged my arrival, offering a distracted wave before returning to her conversation with Bethany. I made my way to the drinks cart, where Harold handed me a scotch without asking my preference. "Liquid courage," he said, with a wink that felt more menacing than friendly. Dinner was announced 30 minutes later by the housekeeper, an older woman named Margaret who avoided eye contact with everyone except Patricia. The dining room continued the theme of calculated opulence. A table that could seat 16, set with what Patricia proudly identified as Wedgwood china and sterling silver flatware that had belonged to her grandmother. The seating arrangement placed me directly across from Harold at the far end of the table, with Amanda to my left rather than beside me. This positioning guaranteed that any comment I made would need to project across the full length of the table, maximizing the opportunity for everyone to witness any speech difficulties. Before the first course was served, Harold stood to offer a toast. "To family," he said, raising his glass, "and to those who wish to join it." His eyes fixed on me with unmistakable challenge. Everyone drank, and I noticed Amanda exchange a look with her father that sent a chill through me. The appetizer, a seafood bisque, was served in uncomfortable silence. Then Harold launched his first direct question. "So, Dominic, what exactly is your position on the cryptocurrency regulatory frameworks being proposed in Congress? As a technology expert, you must have insights worth sharing." The question was clearly designed to provoke a lengthy, complex response on a controversial topic. I took a steadying breath before answering using the techniques I had been practicing. Believe that our regulation is necessary, but needs to balance innovation with consumer protection. The words came out with moderate difficulty, several noticeable blocks, but nothing catastrophic. Harold nodded with exaggerated interest. "Fascinating. And could you elaborate on which specific protections you feel are most critical in preventing market manipulation while ensuring liquidity remains adequate? For institutional investors, the deliberately convoluted follow-up question increased my anxiety. I took a sip of water, focusing on staying calm. "The most important issue is T transparency in." The T sound trapped me completely, my mouth frozen in position as I struggled to push past the block. That is when it happened. Amanda, my wife of 15 months, the woman who had once held my hand through speech therapy exercises, deliberately imitated my stutter. "T transparency." She mocked her face, contorted in an exaggerated expression of strain. "Do you think he will ever finish a sentence tonight?" The table fell silent for one horrified moment before Harold burst into laughter, quickly joined by Patricia and Bethany. Amanda, encouraged by their reaction, continued her performance. Look at him," she said, pointing at my shocked face. Struggling like a broken machine. Maybe if we turn him off and on again, he will learn to speak like a normal person." Harold reached across the table to high-five his daughter, adding, "The IT solution for everything. Right. Have you tried rebooting your husband, Amanda?" This sent another wave of laughter around the table, during which Bethany pulled out her phone to record the moment. I sat frozen, my face burning with humiliation. The room seemed to tilt sideways, voices becoming distant, as if I were underwater. Amanda was still talking, but her words blurred together. I noticed Margaret standing in the doorway to the kitchen, her expression a mix of pity and discomfort, before she quietly withdrew. Some deeply ingrained social conditioning made me attempt a smile, trying to show I could take a joke. This only emboldened Amanda. Oh, he thinks this is funny too. See, Dad, I told you he does not mind. He knows his limitations. She reached over to pat my hand condescendingly. Without conscious decision, I stood up from the table. Everyone fell silent, perhaps expecting an outburst or dramatic exit. Instead, I calmly began collecting their half-finished plates. You seem to be finished with dinner, I said, each word emerging with surprising clarity. Let me help clear the table. I carried the stack of fine china to the kitchen where I methodically scraped food into the garbage and loaded the dishwasher. Through the swinging door, I could hear their conversation resume, muffled laughter, punctuating whatever new topic of mockery they had found. The kitchen, with its gleaming professional appliances and marble countertops, became momentarily my refuge, the only place in that house where I could breathe. Margaret entered a few minutes later, her eyes downcast. You do not need to do that, sir, she said quietly. That is my job. I need something to do with my hands right now, I replied, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. She nodded with understanding and silently joined me in the task, her presence oddly comforting. They do this to everyone, she finally said, so softly, I almost missed it. Last year it was Bethany's boyfriend. The year before, Harold's new associate. They build people up just to watch them fall. She looked up briefly, then away. Just so you know, it is not personal. It is just how they are. But it was personal. My wife had used my greatest vulnerability as entertainment, transforming my lifelong struggle into a performance for her family's amusement. If marriage did not make something personal, what could I finish helping Margaret with the dishes, then returned to the dining room, where dessert was being served as if nothing had happened. Amanda glanced up at me with mild surprise. There you are. We thought maybe you had left. There was no apology in her voice, no recognition of what she had done. I took my seat and remained largely silent through dessert and coffee, responding with nods or single-word answers when directly addressed. No one attempted to draw me into further conversation, seemingly satisfied with the evening's entertainment at my expense. As the night wore on, I observed them with new eyes, noting the casual cruelty in their interactions with each other, the competitive barbs between sisters, the cutting remarks from Harold to Patricia about her weight, the way they discussed absent friends with gleeful malice. When it was time to leave, Amanda announced she would stay the night at her parents' house. We are doing Christmas morning here like always, she explained, not bothering to ask if I minded or wanted to join. You can come back tomorrow around noon for presents and lunch. The dismissal was so casual, so complete, that I felt almost invisible. The drive back to the hotel was a blur of swirling snow and darker thoughts. In the anonymous comfort of the hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed for nearly an hour, replaying the evening in excruciating detail. My phone buzzed several times with messages from Amanda, not apologies but practical reminders about what time to arrive the next day, and instructions to wear the green sweater she had bought me because we are taking family photos. I did not respond to her texts. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching apartments in Boston. I did not return to her parents' house the next day. I switched off my phone, ordered room service, and watched old movies until checkout time. Then I drove home to our empty house, packed a suitcase of essentials, and took Einstein to my parents' home 2 hours away. I told them I needed space to think, offering only the vaguest explanation about problems with Amanda. They asked few questions, providing the quiet acceptance I desperately needed. By New Year's Eve, Amanda had progressed from confused texts to angry voicemails to showing up at my parents' house unannounced. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop halfway between our home and my parents', a public place where I felt safer from both her potential reaction and my own uncertain emotions. What is wrong with you? Were her first words as she slid into the booth across from me. You embarrassed me in front of my entire family. Dad says you clearly have emotional problems on top of your speech issues. The audacity of her accusation should have angered me, but instead I felt an odd calm. I will not be coming back. I said the words emerging without a single stutter. I want a divorce. Her face transformed instantly from indignation to disbelief, because of one little joke. You are this fragile. It was not a joke, Amanda. It was cruelty. And it was not just Christmas. It has been happening for months in smaller ways. I maintained eye contact, despite the discomfort. I deserve better. She shifted strategies immediately, tears replacing anger. I am so sorry, Dominic. I do not know what came over me. Dad always brings out the worst in me. Please, we can fix this. I will go to therapy. We both will. For a moment I wavered. The Amanda before me looked like the woman I had fallen in love with, vulnerable, seemingly sincere. But then I remembered Margaret's words. They build people up just to watch them fall. I have made my decision, I said, standing to leave. My lawyer will contact you next week. January brought new determination. I moved into a temporary corporate apartment provided by my company after explaining the situation to Jackson, who proved to be unexpectedly supportive. Take all the time you need, he said. Your work has been exceptional despite whatever personal challenges you are facing. I found a new speech therapist, Dr. Roland Myers, who specialized in psychological approaches to stuttering. Your speech impediment is not just mechanical, he explained in our first session. It is tied to your emotional state, your sense of safety, your perception of judgment. We worked not only on traditional techniques, but also on addressing the deeper wounds, childhood bullying, professional anxiety, and most recently, the betrayal by Amanda. When you speak, Doctor, Myers observed, you often look like you are expecting punishment. We need to change that expectation. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings began. Amanda alternated between tearful pleas for reconciliation and vicious attacks on my character, often within the same conversation. You were lucky I even looked at you, she said, during one particularly heated phone call. No one else will want someone who cannot even speak properly. Her words hurt, but also strengthened my resolve. I threw myself into work exceeding expectations on the new project I was leading. My team responded to my technical leadership despite or perhaps because of my communication challenges. I developed a system where team members would help present my ideas in meetings, creating a collaborative approach that actually improved our overall communication. February brought the search for a permanent home. I found a small but modern apartment in Cambridge, close enough to work to walk on nice days with a dog park nearby for Einstein. The process of furnishing it became unexpectedly therapeutic, choosing items that reflected my tastes alone, creating a space where I felt completely comfortable. I reconnected with friends. Amanda had subtly separated me from people who expressed shock at what had happened, but welcomed me back without judgment. My college roommate, Frank, now a psychology professor, invited me to guest lecture in his human communication class, an opportunity I would have declined immediately a year earlier, but now cautiously accepted. Standing before 20 undergraduate students, I spoke about my experience with stuttering from both technical and emotional perspectives. I stuttered throughout the presentation, but for the first time in my life I did not apologize for it. The students asked thoughtful questions, and afterward several approached to thank me for my honesty. One young woman with a visible stutter cried as she told me it was the first time she had seen someone like her in a teaching role. By April, I had established new rhythms in my life. Weekly therapy, daily speech exercises, advancing projects at work, evenings with Einstein or friends, weekends exploring parts of Boston I had never visited during my marriage. I spoke more, not less deliberately, placing myself in situations that required verbal communication. Each small victory built upon the last. Amanda's attempts to contact me became less frequent, but more desperate. She left packages at my office that I returned unopened. She sent emails with subject lines ranging from, "I still love you," to "You will regret this," that I filtered into a folder I rarely checked. Her lawyer and mine handled necessary communications about property division and financial settlements. In June, exactly 6 months after the Christmas dinner, Amanda appeared outside my apartment building as I returned from walking Einstein. She looked unkempt. Her designer clothes wrinkled, her makeup smudged. "Dominic, please," she called, as I approached the entrance. "Just talk to me." I continued inside without acknowledging her. 20 minutes later, she was still there, now yelling up at my window from the sidewalk. "I know you are in there. You owe me a conversation. You cannot just throw away 3 years without talking to me." My phone buzzed with a text from Bethany, the first contact I had had with any member of her family since Christmas. Please, answer her. Things are bad. Dad is under investigation for fraud. They are losing everything. She needs you. I stood at the window looking down at Amanda, now crying openly on the sidewalk below. Neighbors were beginning to notice some casting concerned glances, others clearly annoyed by the disturbance. I could have called building security, or simply continued to ignore her. Instead, I made a different choice. I went downstairs and opened the door. Amanda rushed toward me, words tumbling out about how much she missed me, how sorry she was, how everything had fallen apart. Her father was facing federal charges for investment fraud. Her mother had started drinking heavily, and they were selling the house to pay legal bills. Can I come up, please, Dominic? I have nowhere else to go. Beth kicked me out after we fought about you. I always loved you. That night was a terrible mistake. I looked at the woman I had once believed was my partner, the person who had seen beyond my stutter to the man beneath. Now I saw her clearly beautiful but hollow, raised in a family where cruelty was currency, incapable of true empathy. No, I said the word, emerging perfectly formed. You cannot come up, but I have changed. I will never hurt you again. I was stupid and cruel, and the divorce is final next week. I interrupted, each word distinct and clear. I have nothing more to say to you. You cannot even speak properly without me, she said, desperation turning to spite. Who else will put up with your disability? I was the best thing that ever happened to you. I smiled then, surprising us both. That is where you are wrong, Amanda. The best thing that ever happened to me was leaving you. I gestured toward her family. You think I am broken? Look at what your perfect family has become. At least my flaws are on the surface. Yours rot you from the inside. She stared at me, mouth open in shock. I had never spoken to her with such clarity, such confidence. After a moment, she whispered, "When did you learn to talk like that?" I always knew how I replied. I just needed the right motivation to find my voice. Then I turned and walked back inside, closing the door firmly on that chapter of my life. It has been 2 years since that Christmas dinner changed the course of my life. My stutter remains part of me, some days better, some days worse, but it no longer defines me. Dr. Myers helped me understand that true fluency is not about perfect speech, but about being heard and valued regardless of how the words emerge. The professional growth that began as a refuge during my divorce has blossomed into unexpected opportunities. Last year, I was promoted to technical director, leading a team that developed a groundbreaking accessibility application. Ironically, my experience with communication challenges proved invaluable in designing software for people with various disabilities. Einstein and I still live in the Cambridge apartment, though we recently added a roommate. Sarah, a children's speech pathologist I met at a professional conference, understands more than most the complex relationship between communication and self-worth. Our relationship began as a friendship based on mutual professional interests and gradually deepened into something more. She never finishes my sentences unless invited to, and her patience stems from genuine respect rather than performance. The healing process has not been linear. There are still days when memories of Amanda's mockery resurface, triggering old speech patterns and insecurities. On those days, I use the tools Dr. Tu praised. Myers taught me mindfulness exercises, positive self-talk, and most importantly, self-compassion. I no longer see my stutter as something to overcome, but as part of the unique way I move through the world. Last month, I received an unexpected email from Margaret, the housekeeper, who had shown me kindness that Christmas night. She wrote to tell me that Harold had been sentenced to 12 years for fraud. Patricia had moved in with a sister in Florida, and the house had been sold at auction. She ended with a simple line that brought tears to my eyes. "You got out just in time. You were the only one who ever did." Bethany contacted me once more after Amanda's sidewalk breakdown. Her message was brief, but meaningful. "You deserved better than what we did. I am sorry for my part in it." I chose not to respond, not out of anger, but because some chapters are better left closed. The most significant change has been in how I speak about my stutter. I started a YouTube channel documenting my ongoing journey with speech therapy, connecting with others who face similar challenges. What began as personal therapy has grown into a community of thousands who share their stories of communication differences and the people who have helped or hurt them along the way. Amanda appears occasionally in my peripheral vision, a mutual friend mentioning she moved to Chicago, her name on a marketing campaign I encountered at work. These moments no longer trigger pain or anger. If anything, I feel a distant compassion for someone raised in such emotional poverty that cruelty became her native language. The lesson I carry forward is not about speech fluency, but about recognizing my own worth, independent of others' judgment. My value was never determined by the smoothness of my sentences, but by the content of my character and the kindness I extend to others. The greatest fluency is not in perfect speech, but in authentic self-expression, however it manifests. To those watching who struggle with their own differences, whether visible or hidden, your voice matters exactly as it is. The right people will listen to what you say, not how you say it. And to those who have been silenced by someone who claimed to love you, reclaiming your voice is the most powerful response possible. Have you ever had to find your voice again after someone tried to silence you? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit subscribe and turn on notifications so we can continue building this community of resilience together. Remember, sometimes the clearest speech comes after the deepest silence. Thank you for listening. And until next time, speak your truth, whatever form it takes.